At 0312 this morning, something moved through the tree line to the northwest. I was already awake. I'm always already awake in 0312. I lay still in the dark and ran the assessment. Threat, low. Likely elk or deer based on movement pattern. I noted the time and the bearing. Then I realized I was doing it. Lying in a cot in a one-room cabin in Mineral County, Colorado, running a tactical threat assessment on a forest that doesn't need me to defend it. And I lay there for another hour, unable to stop. The cot has hospital corners. I don't know how to make it any other way. 35 years. Nobody inspects them. Nobody has inspected them in 9 years. I still pull the wool blanket taut and tuck it at a 45-degree fold. If the angle isn't right, I strip it and start over. I've started over at 0430 in January with the wood stove burned down to coals and the cabin at 38 degrees. Stripped the whole cot, redid the corners, then stood there in the dark and thought, who is this for? Mineral County, Colorado. The cabin sits at 9,400 feet above the headwaters of the Rio Grande. Nearest town, Creed, 23 miles, population 290. I know because I drove through it my first week and counted the occupied buildings. Old habit. Terrain assessment. What are your assets? What are your limitations? I was doing it again. Lieutenant General, 3 stars. Commanding General, Multinational Corps, Iraq. 35 years of service. That's the official biography. 400 people at the retirement ceremony. I knew perhaps 60 of them well enough for a conversation that wasn't about operations or the budget cycle. We called it a ceremony. 0530. Firewood. 3 armloads before coffee. In January at this altitude, -15 is not unusual. The knuckles crack on the axe handle. The blood freezes before it runs. We called it planning factors. 0700. Perimeter walk. 40 minutes. There is no perimeter. There is no threat. But I walk it every morning. Military scheduling applied to a wilderness. Nobody asked me to write the checklist. There is no staff. There is no battle rhythm. The Senate Armed Services Committee, October 2005, room 216, Hart Building. Senator Carl Levin looked over his glasses. General Holloway, are we winning in Iraq? I had classified intelligence in my head. I knew the trajectory. I knew we were not winning. I said, Senator, we are making measurable progress. The machine ran and produced that sentence, and I delivered it with the controlled authority of a man trained since 18 to project certainty, especially when certainty does not exist. I drove back to the Pentagon. I have no memory of the drive. I found myself in the parking garage, sub-level 2, hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The overhead fluorescent lights were flickering, a specific frequency. I'd heard it before. Way City, 1968, the field hospital. Same flicker, same hum. That's all it took. And I was in both places at once. A 3-star general in a parking garage and a first lieutenant watching a 20-year-old kid from Tennessee get his leg amputated while the lights flickered. 47 minutes. I sat in that car. I didn't cry. The sentence, we are making measurable progress, played in my own voice in a loop, and under it, like a track bleeding through, was the sound of a bone saw. Next morning, I submitted my retirement paperwork. Specialist First Class Derek Odom, 22, Macon, Georgia, killed in Fallujah, November 2004. I wrote his Medal of Honor citation personally. Every word is true. Technically, legally, factually true. The original draft is on the shelf above the wood stove, face down since I put it there. I have not reread it. I know the parts that aren't in it. The building was reported cleared. It had not been cleared. The preceding lieutenant had been awake 38 hours and made an error in the clearing log. The exhaustion was a product of the operational tempo I had set, my operations order, my commander's intent. At the White House, his mother hugged me and said, "He would have been so proud to know you read his story." I had written his story, my version, and she thanked me for it. Commander's intent is doctrine. You issue the end state, what needs to be true when the operation is over, and your subordinates act in its spirit even when you're not there. The intent executes itself. I wrote Commander's intent for operations that produced 847 confirmed casualties in a single rotation. My words, my intended end state, by kids who'd never met me, in my name. We called it effects-based operations. Hugh City, Tet Offensive, January 1968. I was 23 years old. Street by street, building by building. Sergeant James Earl Whitaker from Wheeling, West Virginia, turned around on a half-destroyed bridge with tracers going overhead and said, "LT, whatever happens, just keep moving." Whitaker was killed 3 days later. Sniper, through the neck, standing next to me. The warmth, that's the detail I remember. Not the sound, the warmth. That was the first war. The war that taught me how the machine works. You feed yourself into it. Your fear, your judgment, your capacity for horror, and it processes you into something functional. And if you're good at it, they promote you until you're behind ballistic glass writing Commander's intent for operations that produce 847 casualties in a rotation. We called it career progression. September. During the rut, a bull elk bugles from the ridge to the northwest, between 0200 and 0400. The first time I heard it, I thought someone was being killed. A high squeal dropping into a guttural chuckle 300 yards, coming through the timber. When I understood it was just the animal being what it is, no doctrine, no intent, no approved language. That was the first time in decades I heard something and didn't run an assessment on it. I just lay there and listened. That happens less often than I want it to. Out here I issued one more commander's intent, to myself. No staff, no subordinates, no approved language, just the end state. Stop producing effects. Stop writing words that become actions, that become consequences, that become statistics. Stop being the architect of outcomes that execute themselves in your name, by people who never met you in places you will never see. I don't know if I'm succeeding. The intent is issued. The execution is ongoing. The machine is still in there. But the elk bugles from the ridge to the northwest, and for a few seconds in the dark at 9,400 feet, the machine stops. And there is just the sound. And the sound doesn't need my intent. Out here, I don't have a name for it yet. The peaks are going dark. Last light on La Garita, pink to gray. The shadow rising through the valley like water. The legal pad is on the table, blank. The shelf holds what it holds, face down. The cot has corners that nobody inspects. The execution is ongoing. I suppose that's where I am.